Hello, my name is Lewis Montague and my U number is U00046415.
My name's Alex Arnold and my U number is 00050095.
My name is Joseph Walker and my user number is U00031739.
We are students and we are part of the HNC course level 4 in Sports Exercise Science, and today we are doing Unit 2 Fundamentals of Sports and Exercise Psychology, and this is assignment 1, the motivated athlete, the roles of self-efficacy in sport and exercise, participation and the group and leadership. Okay, so for this first section of LO1 we are going to be talking about motivation and all of the things associated with motivation. Nice.
Okay, so motivation can be defined as the reason or reasons to act in a particular way, and is the driving force behind human action. It involves biological, emotional and social forces which create a desire to accomplish something. When we want to accomplish a goal, motivation is needed to help improve our habits and get results. This is the driving force behind human action and behaviour. In a sporting context, motivation is used to improve skills and achieve goals. There are 3 types of motivation. These include intrinsic, extrinsic and achievement.
So the first type of motivation that we're going to talk about is intrinsic, and this is the behaviour that is driven by internal rewards from an athlete. That means that they're mostly motivated or entirely motivated by their own actions, thoughts or just themselves in general. Stuff like enjoyment or fulfilment from the sport can be an example of this satisfying an athlete intrinsically. The next motivation that we're going to talk about is extrinsic. This is the behaviour driven by external or physical rewards. For example, an extrinsically driven athlete might be more drawn towards trophies or medals and money rather than fulfilment or enjoyment from the sport. Athletes that are motivated to play well so that they can get these rewards as the end product. The third and final motivational force that we're going to talk about is achievement motivation. This is the behaviour of being dedicated to developing and demonstrating high levels of abilities in sports and performance, where an individual expects their performance will be evaluated in relation to some standard of excellence.
Motivation can be positive, however it also can bring negative effects to sports. So if you are extrinsically motivated, you won't really enjoy the sport anymore, and you are just playing for the extrinsic rewards.
So I'll talk about the benefits of motivation. So motivation is really important. So all the motivations that were spoken above, all of them have benefits to them. High levels of motivation can bring benefits. For example, one of the benefits can improve an athlete's performance. So obviously the more motivated an athlete is, the more time and effort they're going to be putting into training. So this can be due to intrinsic motivation, so they could be just wanting to improve their performance because they enjoy it and doing a lot of training to enhance their skills, which will improve their performance in the game. Or this can also be extrinsic motivation, which the athletes can be doing this to, for example, win a trophy at the end of the season or something. So they're doing this for a goal or their own purposes to improve their performance. Another benefit, it improves an athlete's confidence. So like I said a bit before, so athletes that the more they improve their skills, and the more time they practice them, they're going to get better at performing these skills. And when it comes to game situations, they will more likely perform the skills better than if they weren't practicing. So, and the better the athlete performs in a game, and the better they execute these skills, the more confident they're going to feel, and this will increase their performance and also their self-confidence. Another benefit, intrinsic motivated athletes they're more self-motivated, so they enjoy the sport. So this means that they will focus on weaknesses in their game and help improve their performance, which actually has benefits. So this will help reduce stress and help make mistakes because they're focused and they're concentrated on improving themselves to the very best, so it reduces stress. And another benefit is athletes that enjoy the sport are more likely that will lead to better performance, because the more effort you put in, the better you're going to perform at certain skills and stuff.
So there are negatives to motivation. One of these is the leading to over-arousal. When you become over-aroused, your attention to what you're doing to a skill will decrease. You might have some poor decision making if you're too excited to play in. You could also be under-aroused as well, so you're not ready for your game.
All of these effects that cause over-arousal can lead to, as Alex said, bad performance. And an example of that in a sporting situation might be a rugby player who's over-aroused and can't make the proper decision, or which leads to a bad tackle or a high tackle, which gives their team a penalty or some sort of backlash for the action that they've just performed. Too much motivation as well can lead to athletes becoming burnt out. Burnout is when an athlete experiences overwhelming exhaustion from training and competition. There are, however, two factors that can cause burnout. One is internal, which is an example would be high expectations of performance, and the second is external, and an example of this could be physical exhaustion or injury from training, being in a gym, doing drills, or not having the proper form or something like that.
Yeah, and so over-arousal as well. So too much of that can increase muscle tension. So this means that athletes will be performing, and they might get a bit carried away and not be focusing on certain movements they're doing, and they might plant their leg and accidentally twist in the opposite direction, and this can also obviously cause an injury, and it can increase tension on the muscles, which can also lead to injury. Poor decision making, like these other two said, if you're really over-aroused, you can kind of lose concentration and lose focus of things, and obviously this leads to poor decision making and can affect the result of the game, and also make you get injured as well. Too much motivation can lead to overtraining. So basically, overtraining is where athletes train for too long. For example, if they're training 7 days a week, or anything less, but they're not having any breaks, or not having any breaks at all, can lead to overtraining. And this happens when an athlete is too motivated. So this is it's good to be motivated, but too motivation can, like I said, lead to over-arousal. And the negative of this can be athletes can be fatigued, they can get injured because obviously they're not having breaks, their muscles can get quite tense, or they can hurt themselves. They can get illnesses because they're training so much, their body's just working on high alert all the time, they're not resting, so the body can be more prone to getting ill, and sleep deprivation, disturbance, so basically, athletes overtrain so much that they're struggling to get sleep, and sleep is very important when it comes to getting good performance, so they can obviously make bad decisions due to low sleep.
Motivation is key in sport. However, obviously, if there is too much, all of this can lead to these.
Yeah, exactly. Like, motivation is very key, but obviously it's having that right balance. You want to have the right motivations, like we said about the other three motivations: achievement, intrinsic and intrinsic. They're all good motivations, but they all have their weaknesses, and obviously being too motivated can affect performance as well.
It's very important for a coach or anyone training an athlete to understand the personality of that athlete in order to get the best type of motivation for that athlete, where it be intrinsic or extrinsic for achievement. Like Lewis said, it is very important to know your athlete and know what will drive them.
100%, because not every athlete is going to be the same. Some athletes might be more intrinsically motivated, some might be intrinsically motivated, and some might be achievement motivated. So it's just understanding your athlete, what type of motivation helps them, and this will evidently improve their performance.
You're also going to lead them to perform the best.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so now in this section of the assignment, we are going to be talking about the theories of motivation.
So this is the cognitive evaluation theory. This theory was put forward by Darcy and Ryan in 1985. The theory surrounds two factors, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. The theory allows us to acknowledge the internal and external states, for example, extrinsic factors, which could include playing and competing for a tangible reward, which has like monetary value or just value to themselves. So in summary, it's just intrinsic factors that affect the athletes in summary, the theory assesses the extrinsic factors that have an effect on the intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, intrinsic motivation. So this type of motivation is internally generated. So this is where athletes are more going to do like tasks from their own self motivated reasons. So for example, if they want to complete tasks or goals, they'll do it off their own back. And it is not determined by physical factors. So for example, external factors are physical rewards. These athletes are not motivated by getting a reward, they just do it because they want to complete a task and they're doing it for their own reasons. And this, for example, is they do it because it might make them happy and it might improve their self-motivation, so that's why they do it. And
they want to improve their skills, so they go out of their own way to improve their technique and their sport.
Yeah, exactly.
The next one, extrinsic motivation, focuses more on tangible rewards rather than self-satisfaction, and it's associated with achieving a goal in the sport that may produce a medal or a trophy. This type of motivation is more focused on external factors such as trophies, as I said, and medals and more praise and monetary value. It can also be verbal, for example, a coach giving feedback to a player, mostly positive feedback, as to motivate their player or athlete. The implications of too extrinsic motivation could then decrease the level of satisfaction when a reward is given. So if a player or an athlete has put a lot of effort into working towards their extrinsic reward, and the reward isn't as fulfilling as they hoped it would be, it can then decrease motivation and satisfaction further for the next reward that they want to achieve.
So these types of motivations, they have a big impact on each other. So when an athlete, when an intrinsic athlete gets rewards, it will impact their intrinsic motivation. So for example, like Joe said, when an intrinsic person gets a reward, they might lose a bit of satisfaction depending if it doesn't meet how much effort they put in. But intrinsic motivation, there's been results that it improves confidence, and it also improves the enjoyment for the athlete in the sport. It seemed, and it's more of there's more benefits to intrinsic motivation than extrinsic. But extrinsic motivation has also got benefits, as because the athletes are getting rewards, they're going to put a lot of time and effort in, and it also motivates them. And there are famous athletes that obviously both have these different types of motivation, but they're both quite accessible. So they both have impacts on each other.
People who are more extrinsically motivated are always looking for the next opportunity for a reward, or for example trophy, money, anything like that, win or lose sometimes, especially in fighting sports or combat sports like the UFC. You get money regardless of whether you win or lose, so there is a tendency that it might hinder progress or satisfaction in the sport because of that. While an athlete who is more intrinsically motivated is looking to improve their performance and skills and training in a game scenario for self-desire, satisfaction, and that furthers their motivation.
I was going to say that people can definitely start out intrinsic and turn extrinsic and vice versa. So someone could start a sport because they love the sport, then turn out they actually really enjoy the appraisal and the rewards they get from it. And it could also flip the other way. So if they start to play a sport because they want to get the rewards, they could also start to fall in love with their sport.
Yeah, that's also true. I also want to say that with extrinsic motivation, there's also you could say there's a limit. So with intrinsic, you're just going to play to improve yourself and enjoyment. So I guess there's kind of no limit to that, if you know what I mean. So you can be playing the sport because you enjoy it, so you can reach the highest level and still be enjoying it and playing it. But you could say that extrinsic rewards and athletes that motivate like that, if they reach that top level, so in boxing or UFC, they get that top heavyweight belt, or they get the top belt. After a while, you could say there's no that higher reward they can get. So
they
they
sort
could,
of start to.
yeah, they could be at like a still point, and then that could start to decrease. So that's why, in my opinion, and I think some research supports it, that intrinsic motivation is better than extrinsic, but they both motivate athletes, and that they can both be quite successful.
And it could also be said for the fact that if you are intrinsically or extrinsically motivated, the environment that you are in, for example, the sport that you play, or the team that you're with, or the coach that you have, can definitely have an impact on the type of motivation that you'll get. They can sort of have an influence on changing whether or not you enjoy the sport or play it strictly for external rewards.
I suppose you can also be a bit like, can't you? You can
Yeah.
also have a bit like, then you could really enjoy the sport, but also really enjoy the feeling that you get when you win them. Or
And this is what the theory is trying to say, like they're both separate, but then you can have both, but then they've both got positive and negative as well. So then we found a case study about a person that obviously explains this for a bit more.
We found a case study of a scientist called Dici, and he conducted an experiment with participants, and they were given money for participating in an activity, small activities like, for example, just like written worksheets or crosswords, puzzles, stuff like that. And it was said because they were paid, they subsequently spent less time on their tasks than people who perform the task just off their own desire. Simply because the participants who were paid were extrinsically motivated, and they were only looking for the money. They didn't find the enjoyment out of the task.
Exactly.
But the participants who did it for their desire actually found satisfaction from completing the task, so they spent more time in making sure that they got it right.
a later experiment, he changed the reward from payment to verbal praise. The person given the verbal praise had a larger impact on the individual's performance in their activity. So the study found that when women gave praisal to men, it motivated the men to spend more time on their task. However, when women received praisal from men, they spent less time in their activity.
So yeah, you could say with this, for intrinsic and extrinsic, by giving this feedback, kind of like boosts their self-confidence. So that's probably why they had such a larger impact on doing the task. But yeah, you could say that for like extrinsic, the impact was taken on, but you could say that intrinsic wanted it more because obviously they get verbal praise and it kind of impacted them. But they're both types of motivation were improved from this verbal praise.
So we have got a comparison of two MMA fighters who fought in the UFC, who were both influenced by different types of motivation. The first is Khabib Nurmagomedov, and the second being Conor McGregor.
So with Khabib, there's been interviews and other stuff, and he's basically said to the media that he's intrinsically motivated, and he respects the rules of the game, and he loves to play the game, and he literally only fights to improve himself, and he fights out of enjoyment. He doesn't want to become like super big or super famous, and in 2021, his father died, and he hasn't trained since. So that kind of also shows that he had a big support with him that intrinsically motivated him as well to train and to become a really good fighter. So because one of his family members has passed away, he's stopped. So that shows that he's not just keep on going to get rewards. He's actually quite humble and quite intrinsically motivated. And because of this type of motivation, this is why he's such a really good fighter and at the top of his game.
In opposition to Khabib, we've got Conor McGregor, who throughout most of his career has fought for monetary gain and the rewards that come with winning fights and being the best fighter in his weight class, like belts and all that sort of thing. He enjoys playing mind games and getting into vocal altercations with his opponents, as to sort of break them down before the fight, to give him a advantage over his opponent before he even steps in the octagon with them. His mindset is more focused on earning money rather than the love of fighting, although it can be said that he does have a love for fighting, but I think because he came from a very poor background, where he was brought up, he's more motivated towards getting money and earning money for his family or personally, and he has been seen to spend that money quite sort of fragrantly, just spending it on cars, clothes and all that sort of thing. But he does keep up with his fighting against his opponents, and he does have a love for it, but like Habib, who his father had an external effect on him when he was fighting, but he did enjoy the sport and have a lot of self-satisfaction from it. Conor is kind of the opposite of that, where he most of his motivation came from external sources like money, trophies, well not trophies but belts, and the smaller bit, the self-satisfaction from the sport was sort of outweighed by getting all of this money.
You basically said it.
Yeah. So yeah, basically this comparing these two athletes, what we're trying to basically show is that these two types of motivations are completely different, but just because you have one or the other, or you can use them both, they both have the same effect. They both make athletes work hard. Obviously there's different outcomes for these motivations, but even though that these two athletes have totally different motivations, they are still quite high up in their sport.
Yeah.
So they really love themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So both of these motivations have positive and negative effects. So that's what we're trying to do.
I think it definitely can be said, like Lewis said, that both of the athletes are very good at the sport. But I think Khabib has lasted a lot longer than Conor. I don't think he has any losses on his record, and he went 29-0. But I think that's to show that self-satisfaction from a sport is a more important motivator, as it sort of pushed him, and he had more fights, and he won all of the fights because of his self-motivation, whereas Conor McGregor was mostly there for a pay, and so he didn't last as long. He lost a few fights, but he kept coming back because of partially the love for the sport, but mostly the extrinsic factor.
I agree with Joe. Like I said a little bit earlier, I feel like intrinsic motivation has no limit. As long as you enjoy something, you're going to put a lot of time and effort into it, and you're going to just keep getting better and better. But with extrinsic motivated, you're going to get to a point where you get the max reward, and I feel like there probably won't, you would want to go higher, but then if there isn't, then I feel like maybe your motivation might decrease and satisfaction will decrease, which might hinder and ruin your performance. So that's why, in my personal belief, and I think Joe's, that intrinsic motivation is probably the better motivation. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think the same. I think they both have limitations to them, but like to each of them. But I think intrinsic is definitely more important for a sport to want to enjoy the sport and stay in the game for longer.
Yeah, I definitely think that Khabib, in a sense, was the better fighter because he had a good balance with his dad, an extrinsic motivation, and the self-satisfaction.
And the love for the sport.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay, so this next theory is the self-determination theory, and this is a micro-theory of human motivation and personality, and it kind of delves in the inherited growth and tendencies of the psychological needs of an athlete. So it's like how they act and what motivates them, and does this motivation help them act in certain ways. It concentrates on the motivation behind choices made without external influences and interferences. So this is just it focuses on the motivation of people, but like without like thinking about environments and stuff like that. So it's just about like how does the athlete behave, and what like motivates them to behave like this. There were two men that introduced this theory, Edward Ducey and Richard Ryan. They introduced this idea in a book in 1985, and the book was called Self-Determination and Intrinsic Motivation in Human Behaviour.
The theory says there's three basic needs: competence, need to be effective. Oh God, I can't bloody read. I'm sorry. The theory says there's three basic needs, which are competence, the need to be effective in dealing with the environment; autonomy, the need to control the course of your life; and relatedness. This is the need to have close relationships with others, connecting with others, and feeling that you are wanted in a space.
Since initial studies occurred more than 30 years ago, 5 mini-theories were developed to address the different issues. The theories are the effects of social environments on intrinsic motivation, the development of autonomous extrinsic motivation, and self-regulation through internalization and integration, individual differences in general, motivational that are essential for growth, integrity, wellness, and the effects of different goal contents on well-being and performance. The mini-theories are used as guidelines and to interpret research on the issues, which include motivation, wellness, across cultures, close relationships, and more.
An individual's behaviour can be seen as self-determined if they have intrinsic motivation. In sport, an individual is self-determined if they are mainly playing a sport that they enjoy. These type of individuals will try to focus mainly on improving their skills and ability in their sport. They have a love for the sport, want to keep playing to improve their self-gratification.
So yeah, overall, this theory just has those three: the competence, autonomy, and the relativeness. It's basically saying that these things can help improve a person's performance and helps motivate an individual to act a certain way, which can improve performance. The studies, Joe said, were just other factors that can be can affect or kickstart an athlete's motivation. So yeah, it's just basically saying that more self-determined an athlete is, the more motivated they'll be. And as we found out, like intrinsic motivated athletes are more self-determined. So obviously that will help them be more confident and they're more focused on doing certain tasks than extrinsic. So the next view we're going to be talking about are the views of motivation.
There are three types of views on how motivation works, and these are the trait-centered view, the situational-centered view, and the interactional view.
Okay, so the trait-centered view, this is also known as the participant-centered view. So basically this view outlines the motivated behaviour of an individual's characteristics. So basically it's just like an individual's personality, needs and goals. It basically is the prime factors that motivate them. So this kind of view centres what motivates an athlete and specific characteristics of their personality, which makes them more motivated to do certain tasks.
The situational-centered view. This view suggests that an individual's motivation is largely determined by the situation. For example, if a gymnast was really motivated to train, but was really unmotivated to perform, obviously the situation changes for each athlete.
So the interactional view, this is a view that is most widely acknowledged by exercise and sports psychologists. This view indicates that motivation results neither solely from the participant factors nor from situational factors. This view suggests that motivation is a combination of most views and theories.
Yeah, so basically sports psychologists will look at these theories and they can kind of determine what motivates an athlete. So if they've got an athlete that's part of the trait-centered views, and then they'll obviously know what motivates them and can help improve their performance. But like Joe said, the interactional view is the most acknowledged and used view, but obviously these views will be used to identify what motivates an athlete, and they can use this to obviously improve their performance. Okay, so the next theory we're going to be talking about is the attribution theory.
This theory was founded by a man named Fritz Heider, who made this theory in 1944.
So the attribution theory has been used to explain the differences in motivation between high achievers and low achievers. According to the attribution theory, high achievers will approach rather than avoid tasks related to succeeding, because they believe that success is due to high ability and effort, which they are confident of. So that's sort of like aiming for more than what your achievement in like a test or something, and a low achiever would be aiming just to pass, where a high achiever would be aiming to get full marks.
Okay, this theory says that performance can be categorised into three districts. So you've got the first one, which is stability of attribution, then you've got locus of casualty, and you've got locus of control. Okay, so stability of attribution. So this is when an athlete loses or wins, there are two factors that come into play: stable and unstable. that can contribute to the event. So basically, stable factors remain a constant, they do not change. So this could be, for example, a high level athlete winning against a lower level athlete. So this won't change because obviously the high level athlete has more ability and skill than a lower athlete, so they're more likely going to win. So that factor won't change. Unstable factors are not constant. For example, this could be like luck. So for example, in football, if a player went to do a free kick and they hit the ball with the wrong part of their foot, but somehow the ball like swerves and goes in, that is an unstable factor, and like that luck helped them score that goal. So obviously it's unstable, there's no constant, it can't be controlled, it just happens. And yeah.
So the locus of causality, this forms on the internal and external factors that influence performance. The internal causality is related to an athlete's mental tenacity or mental toughness. This can be an athlete's strength and weakness. Internal causes can lead to poor performance in games, which will affect the athlete's mental state. External causality are based upon factors outside the athlete's control. For example, poor weather can make playing conditions harder for athletes, leading them to have poor performances.
And then we've got locus of control. So this means that athletes have control. Athletes do have control when they're like playing and stuff. For example, athletes have control of how well and how effective they are training. So this can be like, for example, before the game, like pre-event, they could be, if they put a lot of effort into that training, then that's what they have control of, and that can lead to them having good games. And as well as in training, if they're doing good, effective training, then that can lead to them having a good performance. And yeah, and like I said, all of these, like these two things they can control, have an effect which can help them win or lose a game if they perform them well or not so well.
Attribution in sport is very important as it allows athletes to have the ability to affect our perspective on a future performance. By attributing an athlete's success to stabilised factors, they are able to expect future occurrences in the performance. If a performance is successful, this can subsequently enhance motivation and confidence. However, the opposite effect of this is when an athlete chokes an important part of a game. For example, if they were doing a penalty shootout and they missed, for example, this is an unstable performance leading to a decrease in motivation.
In this bit of the video, the last theory we're going to be talking about is the achievement goal theory.
So this was developed by Atkinson in 1964. Achievement goal theory states that when performing achievement-related tasks, individuals can fluctuate their state of involvement directed towards task or ego goals. This means they can be more or less task or ego involved at any point during a task engagement.
So the main aim of this achievement theory is to explain why certain individuals are more motivated to achieve than others. So and it's kind of based on two psychological principles: the motivation of the individual to succeed, and the motivation of the individual to fail. So, for example, if an individual sets a goal and they don't achieve it, for example, I would say, for example, like if a fighter, a boxer, goes into a fight wanting to win, their task was to win, and they failed. There's depending on the athlete and their motivation. Some athletes might flop and they might feel like sad and they might not want to they're not motivated to go back in to achieve and become better, but some athletes might thrive on this failure and be more motivated to achieve and come back better and get better results.
Another example would be a person who has a strong fear of failure, and this person or athlete might achieve adopt some achievement goals more than others. The difference between failure and the difference between fear of failure based variability and variation due to the actual aim, purpose or focus of that person's achievement behaviour is blurred. Another example of the achievement goal theory or something that might come into play when producing that theory with an athlete or especially in a team sport might be an athlete who sort of is not only focused on the achievement goal theory, like achieving goals that they've set sort of short-term or long-term goals is like the other team mates that they have in that sport. They could probably have a lot of peer influence in that athlete on whether or not they would be excited or stimulated after achieving that goal, or winning failure for that goal.
So this theory is for like athletes that can like thrive on like failure and can thrive on achieving their goals, and it's more about like being motivated to put the extra time and effort in to obviously training harder, just putting the extra effort in to kind of achieve these goals, and once if they do achieve them, to keep going and not get complacent after achieving that goal, to keep on moving on ahead and ahead and ahead, keep getting better and better. A good example of this I would say would be Floyd Mayweather. He's 50-0, he hasn't lost yet, and you could say that he set goals and he achieved them, and he kept on training and keep getting better. He didn't get complacent, and because of that you could say that's why he didn't lose, because he was just so much more dedicated and trained harder than other fighters, and that's why he was so good in his sport.
I was going to say, you could also, he didn't just stick to learning the basic skills. He learned his skills and decided to learn more and more and get better and better at sport. He didn't get, like I said, complacent with his ability to perform in his sport.
You can also make a lot of different goals within that sport.
Yeah.
I think that, especially with someone like Floyd Mayweather, who towards the majority of his career was motivated with the end goal of achieving a lot of money, and with a short-term goal of maybe some stuff in training, like how many times he's done a clean jab or hook in training, and that can extend to sort of his performance in the boxing ring when he's fighting an actual opponent, whether or not he wins, and you can also make a lot of smaller goals to help you achieve those bigger goals.
Yeah, and it doesn't just have to be to athletes that haven't lost in their sport, it can be to athletes that have lost, for example like Anthony Joshua in boxing as well. He lost one of his fights, he was undefeated and he lost his fight, and instead of like being an athlete that was like, oh I'm so sad that I lost, and couldn't be motivated to get better, he was motivated and he trained harder and he done the rematch and he won the next fight after that. So it showed that he was focused on succeeding and trying to get better and better, instead of that like crumbling under pressure.
I think that shows he's like intrinsically motivated to.
Yeah, you can say that as well.
You can also see in the second fight that he had against Andy Ruiz, after the first one that he lost, he changed the goals of that fight, or the sort of the tactics that he used, but he probably set smaller goals for that fight in order to sort of keep him in check, or make sure that he was doing the right tactics for the in the fight, sort of keeping him at range, not letting him get in close and stuff like that.
But them small goals led him to win.
Yeah.
Achieving them goals.
The main point of this theory, it all comes down to the individual's mindset, motivation and personality. I think these three factors do have an impact on this theory, because if the athlete doesn't have any of these theories, or has some, or has all, they're probably going to be more achievement motivated, but then some athletes that don't have those traits will be like less achievement motivated.